Two historic days just took place on Wednesday, the 19th of August, and then Thursday, the 20th of August, where federal court was held and on the record over a Zoom call where Chicagoans were able to talk about things that happened to them at the hands of CPD during the protests. The Honorable Robert Dow Jr., who is head of the Federal Consent Decree. The Federal Consent Decree is just this. So the Department of Justice, the federal government under the Barack Obama administration, was sent into Chicago to look for constitutional rights violations. So they audited the Chicago Police Department. In 2017, they came back with a scathing report of a multitude of constitutional rights violations. So much so that there had to be a change. So normally what would have happened was the Department of Justice would have sued the city of Chicago. But President Trump came into power and pulled the Department of Justice out. But in stepped the state of Illinois because they could not turn a blind eye. They had already found these constitutional rights violations. So the state of Illinois sued the city of Chicago. The agreement they came to was the Federal Consent Decree. That's the name of the agreement. It's an agreement which Chicago does not claim any culpability, but they will go along with overhauling their department, the police department, because of multiple constitutional rights violations. Baltimore is also under a Federal Consent Decree. In that case, I believe it was the Department of Justice that sued the city of Baltimore. In the past, cities like New Orleans and St. Louis have been under Federal Consent Decrees. But on these 2 days, regular Chicagoans were able to be on the record in federal court over a Zoom call because of the bird flu and get their stories heard by the Honorable Robert Dow Jr. and the Federal Monitors, which is led by Maggie Hickey. There was close to 600 applications to speak. So they did a lottery system and chose 95. Those that did not get to speak still get a chance to write comments. The deadline is Friday, August 28th. I'll put that in the description so people that want to write comments and be on the record are able to do that. Reports after the first day is that the people that talked were coherent, believable, that CPD was in real trouble. Anyways, let's listen to this. WBEZ Chicago, which does great journalistic work in stories on the internet involving government transparency. A federal judge is collecting stories of alleged police abuse during Chicago protests. The federal judge overseeing Chicago's mandatory police reform, that's the Federal Consent Decree. The mandatory police reform is the Federal Consent Decree. Efforts heard from more than 24 people on Wednesday, including farmers, attorneys, college students, a nanny, a chef, a financial analyst, and a social worker about their experiences with Chicago police during recent protests. They described being struck by batons, pepper sprayed at close range, shoved, punched, dragged, groped, and illegally arrested by police. The activists shared their stories Wednesday during the first of 2 days of court hearings on the city of Chicago's handling of civil unrest this summer. The second listening session is scheduled for Thursday afternoon. While city and police officials have blamed clashes between cops and demonstrators on mob violence and protesters looking for a fight, the speakers on Wednesday described violence driven by police without provocation. The times that I felt the most unsafe were the times that I was around the police, Michael Kaiser Naiman told Judge Robert Dow. I never felt unsafe around any of the other protesters. The times I felt the most unsafe were the times that I was around the police, Michael Kaiser Naiman told Robert Dow Jr., Judge Robert Dow Jr. I never felt unsafe around any of the other protesters. The first-hand accounts are being collected by court-appointed monitor Maggie Hickey, who is investigating how the city and its police department responded to protests as part of her larger task of tracking Chicago's police reform progress. Hickey said 540 people signed up to speak during the 2-day listening session, but they limited the number of speakers to 95 over the 2 days. So 540 people signed up, I know who one of them was, and they only took 95, so they did a lottery system. Kobe Guillory said he was assaulted twice by Chicago officers this summer, with the first incident on May 30th at a protest downtown. Guillory claimed during that protest, officers used a controversial technique known as Kettling, in which they trapped demonstrators and then closed in on them. Chicago police have denied using the tactic. They give these dispersal orders, but they make it impossible for people to actually disperse. So they just give these as an excuse to brutalize and make mass arrests on protest. This is an example of what Kettling is on October 3rd, 2011 in New York, the Occupy Wall Street movement. Police funnel protesters into a certain area and then flank them and come up from behind on them. And in this incident, they just kept them in one place for hours on end until they just knew they were going to be too tired and too hungry to protest anymore. So then when they let them free, they knew that they would go home. Now, that's not always the motive. In this case, that's what it was. At the G20 summit in Toronto in 2010, it was something much, much more maniacal. The inherent problem with these techniques is that 90% of the protesters are there for a peaceful protest. Then there's a small minority, less than 10%, that are a subversive group that want to do harm. And then there are just regular people that are just walking in that area or live in that area. Then there's journalists that are filming as their job requires. So there's a multitude of different reasons why people are there.
You put your trust in police officers. Generally, I do. Then you're standing in the middle of the street in Toronto, kind of wondering who's going to help you. The people who are supposed to help us are the ones doing this to us.
Observation, you do not want us to funnel them out. You want to push the whole group down to the intersection, right?
Sunday afternoon, let's have an ice cream. And on our way to the ice cream, we encountered this group of people who were sitting on the intersection.
It was just some people hanging out in the intersection, basically.
There was like a consistent pounding.
You do not want us to funnel them out. You want to push the whole group down to the intersection, right? We're locking it down.
The following people you hear talking are police officers.
Why are they going to give them a chance to disperse?
They are. That's the problem. That is a problem.
Well, that's stupid.
Waste of resources. Okay.
And just deploy gas and let everybody go.
Nick is maniacal. This man is maniacal. All of the OPD commanders, Scotty, myself, and all say we should get the LRAD for a dispersal route. That apparently has either fallen on deaf ears, has not made it to the MIC. I'm just letting you know that that was our suggestion. We are in several lines with several POUs right now, holding the line as arrests are effected. We're talking in the hundreds.
Over 1,100 people were arrested at the G20 summit in Toronto in 2010. Back to the Chicagoans testifying over Zoom, but in federal court, on federal records, on Wednesday, August 19th. And personally, I was hit with batons multiple times over the course of 4 hours when it was impossible for me to leave that area, Guillory said. I had marks on my forearms and on my stomach for days after that. Janine Wise said she was too at the protest downtown on May 30th and was never given any order to leave before police started pushing her and the rest of the crowd. There was an officer pushing into my chest horizontally with his baton like this, and he was pushing me very, very hard, and I was afraid of stumbling. I was trying to hold my ground, but I wasn't fighting. I never raised my voice, and I was afraid I was going to fall on the ground and get trampled because the police were advancing, Wise said. She said She cried for the officer to stop, and eventually he did, but then Wise said she was attacked again. The police officer next to him looked at me and said, "You want to be in on it? Now you're in on it." And he grabbed me by my neck, and he lifted me, Wise said through tears. He dragged me down the street, through horse poop so hard my back was scraped up and bleeding. And then 2 other officers jumped on me, and I was screaming, "Stop, you got me, you've got me, you won." Many of the speakers referenced incidents at the July 17th protest near the Columbus statue in Grant Park, where police and protesters were injured. Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown blamed the confrontation on a violent mob that hijacked an otherwise peaceful protest. And video shows water bottles being thrown at officers. Only one speaker, Katie Williams, addressed objects being thrown at police. She said it was true that water bottles were thrown at police, but she took issue with the way officers responded. They were mad at those protesters, and they didn't care to seek any sort of justice for them through any sort of legal means. And instead, they decided to beat their way to them through a bunch of peaceful protesters, Williams said. The video that you're looking at here is after they showed the Laquan McDonald dash cam tape. They released it in 2015. But I think what that woman just said is at the heart of all this. It's a very, very small minority of people that went there to do harm. But everybody paid for it. People that weren't even there to protest, journalists, anybody that was there, once the police decided to break ranks and just go into the crowd, it was wanton violence. And I've denounced, and I think any sane person would, the subversive groups that came in and attacked the police. That was wrong. Obviously, a firework is a firework. If you throw it up in the air, if you throw it at somebody, now it's a bomb. That was wrong. But going out and punching 19-year-old females in the face is just as wrong. So, a historic day on Wednesday, August 19th, as federal court was held through a Zoom call where Chicagoans called in and voiced their displeasure, their disdain for what happened to them during protests. Again, on Thursday, August 20th, another round of callers called in. I'll report to you on what happened on Thursday, but this is right here on the left is Judge Dow, who is in charge of the federal consent decree, and then that's Maggie Hickey, who is the lead federal monitor. She is the eyes and ears on the ground, obviously, and they had a federal court proceeding via Zoom where Chicagoans called in on Wednesday and Thursday. And in the description, I'll leave where you guys can get the transcripts of those 2 sessions. And I don't know if you have to qualify or not, but they are taking comments to be on the record up until the 28th of August. But I don't know if you have to qualify for that or not. But I will leave all that in the description. My name is Disorderly Product News. This is the new channel. Disorderly Product News presents the Cop-Arazzi. Wishing you and yours a very happy and healthy, safe weekend. Good night.